The second primetime GOP debate of 2016 is just 3 hours away, and the stakes are getting higher with the first election contest growing closer. What can we expect in round two? This hour, our predictions and our 2 cents for the 11 candidates. But first, a quick look back at some of the highlights from round one.
Is there anyone on stage, and can I see hands, who is unwilling tonight to pledge your support to the eventual nominee of the Republican Party and pledge to not run an independent campaign against that person?
I don't trust President Obama with our records. I know you gave him a big hug, and if you want to give him a big hug again, go right ahead.
Senator Paul, you know, the hugs that I remember are the hugs that I gave to the families who lost their people on September 11th.
See, I think you're on the wrong side of this if you're still arguing for a single-payer system.
I don't think you heard me. You're having a hard time tonight.
I'm proud of my dad, and I'm certainly proud of my brother. In Florida, they call me Jeb because I earned it.
I think God has blessed us. He's blessed the Republican Party with some very good candidates. The Democrats can't even find one.
I'm very hopeful that I'm not the only one who's willing to pick up the baton of freedom, because freedom is not free, and we must fight for it every day.
Campaign Carl Cameron joins us now to help us kick off our coverage of the big event live from the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library in Simi Valley, California. Carl, I know you've been out there all day. Set the stage for us. How are things shaping up?
Well, the candidates have been trickling through the spin room, actually, in advance of the debate. Just a short time ago, Ben Carson came through, and he was immediately mobbed by the cameras. And folks asked him again, as an outsider with no experience, how can you be commander-in-chief? How can you run the country? And he quite simply said, it doesn't take experience, it takes common sense, and I'll be surrounded by wise people. And that has gotten him into a tie nationally on some polls, or a virtual tie within the margin of error with Donald Trump. And in Iowa and New Hampshire now there are polls that show that Carson has also moved in to a virtual tie with Trump as the front runner. So we have a two-person outsider campaign at the top of the roster of 11, and then an absolute battle between the other 8. Carly Fiorina's ascended to the top tier, so she gets that outsider status too, so there's 3 of them. But the other 8 candidates have been mired in the low single digits since the last debate, all of them pushed down there because of the ascent of both Trump and Carson.
Before we take it around the table, Carl, could you set up there is another debate, an earlier debate, and do you expect anything to come out of that?
Well, there will only be 4 candidates participating in that one because Carly Fiorina has jumped up to the top here and Rick Perry has left the race. We're given to understand that Rick Santorum, the Pennsylvania senator who won the 2008 Iowa caucuses, is coming ready to fight, in large measure because it's a small roster in the earlier afternoon debate and there'll be enough time. Part of what's going to happen tonight on the big stage is 11 candidates standing next to one another for what could be 3 hours. Means that fatigue, even a bathroom break, could be a real distraction, and distracted on a campaign debate stage could lead to sloppiness and or miscues. So the sheer length of it tonight is something to watch.
All right, that's a good thing to watch. All right, Kimberly, we'll start with you.
Yeah, we saw some complaints about that already, about the length of it. But, you know, they're already trying to make a distinction from the Fox News debate in terms of their strategy and their approach for tonight to be able to try and make it as successful as ours was. So tell us about that, Carl.
Well, the moderators have made it very clear that they will pose questions to the candidates specifically intended to cause a fight between them. So they'll ask Huckabee a question about what Donald Trump said, or they'll ask Ben Carson about what Carly Fiorina said, in order to pit them against one another. That could raise lots of fireworks. And again, patience is going to be a key strategy tonight. The candidates on the fringes of the roster, the ones who are back in the polls, might get impatient if they don't get their fair share of questions and could react. And it's well to know that one of the questioners tonight will be Hugh Hewitt, the syndicated radio host who tripped up Donald Trump with his foreign policy questions in that radio interview. Trump said they were gotcha questions. An awful lot of folks said that they were pretty standardized questions. That's something that could play into this as well. In addition to the other CNN officials, this will be the first Republican debate where the RNC has suggested that the hosts include a conservative journalist in order to make sure that the questions really do focus on the issues that Republicans care about.
All right, Juan Williams.
Carl, I'm glad to see you got the memo on the tie. I think it's so interesting you talked about the outsiders. I'm sort of interested in an insider, Jeb Bush. He has been slipping in those polls since the first debate. The question is now, what does he have to do tonight?
He has to show that he's plausible, that he can stand up to Donald Trump and not necessarily be sort of made to look small by one of Trump's one-liner show-stopping insults. The other aspect to remember about this is that Jeb Bush, the pedigree that he has, standing in the Reagan Library, can talk about his dad's service with Ronald Reagan. He can talk about his brother's service to the country as president. And this could be one of those opportunities where his heritage could end up being an asset. The 11th commandment, as enunciated by Ronald Reagan, was, "Thou shalt not speak ill of another Republican." We're being given to understand there's going to be a lot of ill speaking about one another tonight. And it'll be interesting to see if anybody says, look, Ronald Reagan, the Gipper, wouldn't go into the Oval Office without a jacket and tie. There was a reverence and a respect for the office to which all these candidates aspire. And if the name-calling and the violations of the 11th commandment get too abrasive, it's entirely possible that one of them will stand up and say, hey, you are not living up to the legacy of Ronald Reagan. This is not the building to be talking like that. We need to show the American people that we're prepared to lead the country instead of beat up on one another.
All right, now to Eric Bolling.
All right, Carl, want to play a little game with me here?
I can try.
Okay. 3 questions. Your choices are over or under. Love the numbers. Okay, so 30 is my number for the number of times that Ronald Reagan or the Gipper's name is invoked tonight. Over or under?
Under. And the college kids and the drinking games are going to be dangerous places. Watch out for the campus security.
I'm going to go
kids.
with over 30 or over. 15 million, the amount of people who watch tonight.
Under. I think it'll probably be larger, at least for the first couple of hours. But after when we get past 11 o'clock, I think it'll probably be much lower.
And the important one, number of candidates that take a shot at Donald Trump tonight thinking that that's the best tactic to get on the screen.
Probably all but 3. Maybe 3 candidates will not get around to it, or will choose not to take the bait, or will decide that for them it's more important to rise above it and try to be a plausible president instead of a name caller.
All right. Thank you.
All right. I'm glad you didn't ask me over under. I've never actually really understood that whole betting thing. Your turn.
Over under means something totally different where I come from, Dana. Over under, Carl. It's a club. The candidates, Carl, they're on stage. There's so many of them. They are actually only 20 inches apart. So how important is hygiene?
Well, hygiene and language and expressions. I mean, look, there are a lot of times you see in these cutaway shots, they'll put the 2 candidates who are going after one another, they'll put them on the split screen. Any candidate who looks at his watch, as George H.W. Bush once famously did, any candidate who rolls his or her eyes, or as John Kerry and Al Gore used to do, huffing and sighing, this sort of stuff, that is a disaster. They have to appear presidential, they have to appear calm, they have to appear to have it together tonight and show that they are plausible presidents. Donald Trump has introduced a new kind of political rhetoric, a new kind of tone and tenor to all of this stuff. Debates don't always lend themselves to that. You can win an argument, and then the next day people can wake up and say that both of the people in the argument ended up looking bad.
Hey, Carl, follow up. Do you think the birtherism is going to come up? I predict that will be the first question to Donald Trump.
If it is, and he answers it, it'll be the first time he's actually done so. He's been asked about his questioning of the president's birthplace and birth certificate a number of times during this campaign, and he has consistently said, I don't want to talk about that. But it's well to note, during the 2012 and 2008 campaigns, Donald Trump was one of the people who were leading the questions about Mr. Obama's heritage and birthplace.
All right, thank you, Carl. We're excited to watch tonight.
You bet.
All right, don't miss the strongest post-debate analysis on television right here on the Fox News Channel starting at 11 p.m. Eastern. Ahead, you'll hear some of the candidates themselves talking strategy for round 2. That's next on The 5.